Oh god, yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Between Buckets podcast. My name is Lucas Pearce, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend Patrick Cross.
Pleasure to be here. Back at it.
I know. I'm liking our grind. I think there's a routine and there's a commitment to it now, Patrick.
Mate, we're everywhere.
We're universal.
Ubiquitous, if you will.
If we're just showing off the dictionary, sure.
Yeah, I just spent 5 to 10 seconds looking that one up, double checking. We all good, or?
That explains the pause. You were flipping through a book, weren't you?
Oh, look, I was confident, but this is a public forum, Lucas. You know, you got to be careful.
Did you look at the phonetic guide as well, so you didn't mispronounce it?
No, I think I had that one down, Pat.
Oh, shout out to your upbringing and education.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Today we have an incredible first... It's not even our first show. Is it our first show for the week, Patrick?
I've lost track of time and space, Lucas. I'm on holidays.
Are you?
Yeah, basically.
What signified your holiday?
Spending this amount of time thinking about the NBA is always good.
How many games have you watched this week as opposed to your usual week?
Definitely more than usual.
Well, that's something.
That's nice.
It's amazing what a league pass will do.
We'll get to that later on, I think.
Absolutely. We've got an incredible show for you all today. First, we're going to talk about the state of the NBA and some of our perspectives on how it's currently being broadcast and its influence, I'd say, and impact in the media. And then we're going to switch to a topic that has long been brewing, even off the air between Patrick and myself, and that is Russell Westbrook, his tenure as a superstar, and whether or not it has now run its course. And then we're going to finish up with a few quick hot takes about what's been going on in both conferences, and I think most of them are really about the playoffs and the end of the season and where teams are going to fall. But first, a quick plug.
If, like Lucas and myself, you enjoy a side dish of written analysis to go with the main meal, which is this podcast, then you should head to betweenbuckets.com. On the site, you'll find feature articles looking at topics such as Giannis's MVP defense, a critical year for Ben Simmons, and our top 25 player rankings heading into the 2019-20 season. Be sure to check it out, as there are some contentious names challenging conventional wisdom and some familiar faces in declining places. Also, be sure to follow Between Buckets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more updates and analysis. Back to the pod.
Now, Patrick, this segment was in essence inspired by a conversation we had about 48 hours ago, where you talked me through watching a game or two on whatever day it was, and just how you were completely enamored with absolutely nothing.
That was basically the crux of it, wasn't it?
It was not even like that surprising when you consider where the media is at the moment and all these calls for changes to the NBA because the season's too long, or or the injury crisis that we're experiencing at the moment, yada yada yada. But basically, I just want to swing to you. Tell me what's going through your head when you sit down on a Tuesday to watch a game of NBA.
Well, basically, what was going on? It was Tuesday.
Good for me.
And I found myself with a cheeky spare day, and I thought I'd sit down and do what I do best, and one of my greatest passions is to watch a bit of hoops. And I'm watching the Mavericks versus the Pelicans, and then a bit of Trailblazers versus Clippers. And a common rant that my father and I have actually when we're watching the games is that we just can't watch them live anymore, because it's too frustrating and too annoying watching these games, which you feel like half the time that a lot of the players aren't taking very seriously at this point of the season.
Sorry, just for myself and everyone listening, which games were they again?
I was watching Mavericks versus Pelicans, and then Trailblazers versus Clippers. A bit of that.
Which both are one-sided games, really.
They were. I mean, definitely the Pelicans game, it would have been a little bit better with, if Zion was going to be in there, and they shouldn't have this many national televised games, but obviously that deal was brokered on the knowledge that Zion would be playing, and that would definitely make me a lot more interested. But it wasn't specifically about Tuesday. This has been like an ongoing opinion that is sort of forming, that these games are they can be really difficult to watch. Obviously, every now and then you get fantastic games. Like I wasn't actually able to watch it, unfortunately, but the Spurs Houston game yesterday looked fantastic. At least for me.
That's one way of describing it. I know what you mean, though. Like, the Boston versus Clippers game the other day was a playoff game in the, early stages of a season. And you're right. I'd say that, every so often you do get a great game. But there is now this transitional period between these games where you have to really drag yourself through some real shockers.
Yeah, and there's a ton of factors in this melting pot of a take. But the things like just watching the game, this is a very simple and obvious opinion, is that there's way too many timeouts. The games take about 2.5 hours to watch. You can look at something else like load management, which is a separate issue in itself, but it sort of feeds into this sort of monotonous nature of the NBA at this stage where you get these big, highly built games and you're someone like a Kawhi Leonard, then if you find out that they're not playing, and it's just not the same anymore. And then there's also another thing which has been annoying me a little bit, and one that like logically makes so much sense, is that just the nature of play at the moment with the heavy isolation dominance and launching 3-pointers I don't find as enjoyable to watch. And I understand that the metrics, the data, the analysis behind it, how 3-point shooting is the nature of today's game, and the volume's just going to go up and up and up, and I agree, it's a smart thing to do, teams should shoot threes, but I don't think it's contributing to a more entertaining product. I mean, I was watching Mavericks versus Pelicans the other day, and it's fantastic to watch Luka get up threes, don't get me wrong, but when every single play is just a pick and roll out the top, it's either a step back three or a drive and dish three to somebody else, and it's just a shooting contest every single game, I just don't find it as entertaining.
So basically, it just sounds like the way that the game is evolving, both on a physical level for the players that are playing it, and on a strategic level, you have issues with it because you think it's changing the identity of basketball and hindering its capacity to be.
Yeah, and I know this sounds like a bit of a, I'm only 21 years old, but it's a bit of an old man get off my lawn speech. But it's just not the most entertaining product at the moment. And it's not just the 3-pointers, it's the other things, as I said, load management. I personally think there's too many timeouts. I think the season is far too long, which is something we can get into, and I just don't think teams have the same incentive to compete really hard on a nightly basis. And it's at this point of the season in particular, you said we're about 15, 20 games in. Teams have a bit of a rhythm so far. We're kind of seeing how the conferences are going to shape up. And going for what is there to really look forward to for the rest of this regular season? I feel like I'm 20 games in, I feel like I'm ready for the playoffs.
I mean, Christmas Day is something that I'm really excited about because I think there's like the LA versus LA game is going to be amazing.
And don't get me wrong, there's definitely regular season games that are fantastic to watch and I'm definitely looking forward to. Like we were mentioning a couple of games earlier, but a couple of weeks ago when the Mavs were playing Lakers, that was sort of second or third week into the season. It was the overtime game. That was fantastic because it had a playoff atmosphere. But just so many times you flick on a game and it's just boring, to be honest. I mean, I looked at the game today as well between the Lakers and the Jazz, a game which I was really excited for and looking forward to. And then the players just kind of looked a little lethargic out there. Utah have got a lot of problems at the moment, which is a separate conversation, but they just got absolutely trounced at home. And it just makes me a little bit worried about, not worried per se, but a little frustrated with the product, which is the NBA at the moment. And it's becoming more and more of a conversation in the league and in the media at the moment because we had the big woes and Zach Lowe bomb the other day about how the league is seriously considering changing its format in terms of the regular season and potentially shorting it, throwing in an in-season tournament, reseeding the last 4 playoff teams. So it's definitely, I'm not alone in this one either, because TV viewership is down as well, which previously had been going up every year. So I think it's a conversation that I definitely think the league should have, and I am all in favour of shaking it up a little bit, because at the moment I just don't think it's where it can and should be.
Well, while we don't necessarily have enough time to talk about comprehensive solutions, I think the points you've raised with the way the game is changing and the 3-point evolution, the only way that ever gets changed is new rules, because the game is going to manifest how it's going to manifest. As for your second point, which was load management, I think that, that is manageable. If a shorter season means a healthier player, because obviously there's less mileage on their bodies throughout the season. And that is probably going to happen at some point. I think all the research into this injury epidemic is going to amount to something.
Yeah,
eventually.
and just on load management, sorry to interrupt, but I'm not necessarily advocating that Kawhi and other players shouldn't load manage either. I actually think, especially after last season's playoffs, under the current format, more players should load manage. I think Embiid should take more games off. Harden every year he's played, significant amount of games and trailed off in the playoffs. I think it's proven that load management works, and I'm not blaming the players for doing it. I'm just saying that it's not good for the league and something should be done to address that.
I mean, there's that side of it, and then just quickly, because I think we pretty much agree on this matter, the case for load management is, LeBron James not appearing in the finals because he got injured in the first round is mitigated by load management theoretically, or it could be. And I guess that's just the other side of that. But moving on, there has been talk about a shortened season, about a mid-season tournament. Where are you at?
Well, personally, I'd like to see the season shortened, but I know that practically that's going to be incredibly difficult because to make a change like this, it requires the approval of over 2/3 of the owners, and owners care about money and the bottom line. And if 82 games are shortened, that means less money, less revenue, less money for the players, and it's a flow-on effect. I get that. So that's why,
which is where the mid-season tournament comes in.
That's why I think that an in-season tournament could be some sort of solution. And there's a lot of different proposed formats for what that could look like thrown around. But I just think it's a discussion that needs to be had, and I'm definitely in favour of it because it looks like the league is. The buzz of shortening the season is getting a bit of momentum. It's just what that would look like, I think.
It's interesting because when I first heard these proposals, and it was actually a while back, I think some commentator likened the NCAA format to the NBA and just talked about what would happen if they somehow created this amalgamation of the two leagues. And the traditionalist in me, the one that loves the 60s records, Wilt Chamberlain's regular season averages, all of that was against it because I like entertaining player comparisons across generations. But at the same time, there's this realization now that so many records just no longer matter because either they weren't shooting threes or the pace wasn't there, the shots, the offensive ratings. And I think that's my counter to the traditionalists that are saying, no, we need to keep it the same because it's always been that way. Because I was in that camp. And it's only when I've watched, even like a play today, I was watching a Heat game and they missed their first 2 threes, longer rebounds, which obviously affects the metrics. And there's this huge dichotomy between the 70s, 80s, and 90s and now because of just how rebounding's changed. And they dished it out and just hit the third. It was 3 3-point attempts in succession when there was so much spacing, and it really should have just gone under the basket where Jimmy Butler was waiting for a layup. But the way we are taught to think about the game and the way the players are taught to play the game, it is shoot that three. If you get the board back, shoot it. If you have that open shot, take it. Doesn't matter if you've missed twice. Doesn't matter if there's a man with a closer shot with a higher percentage because 3 is worth more than 2.
Yeah.
So my only counter to the traditionalist that is hesitant to embrace these new proposals about a mid-season tournament or a shorter regular season is the things that you treasure in those records, those games, the 3,000-point seasons. None of that matters anymore because basketball is not the same as it was back then. And it's getting to the point where so many records are now just being broken because, scoring is so much easier.
I know this is slightly different, but the 3 current all-time leaders in PER for a season are active right now in Giannis, Doncic, and Harden.
Exactly.
So records are getting broken left, right, and center, and it's because of this pace and space nature, as you mentioned. The league, it's a different game from back then.
It is, and looking at Michael Jordan's 1987-88 season, where he averaged the highest recorded PER for the whole 82 games, which was 31.7 from memory, not including Wilt Chamberlain and the pre-1975 season. The way that he would score today, it would be so much higher theoretically because of the amount of times he would get to the line, the absence of the hand-checking rule, the three-pointer, the lanes. All of it would change, but at the same time, it was a different game, and it's not really that fair to compare them because the way that James Harden, Luka Doncic, and Giannis are getting the job done profoundly differ to that of Jordan. And that's my point in a nutshell. You can't hold them to the same standards because it's almost as if they're playing 2 different sports in some aspects.
Yeah, I agree. That's also why I'm not concerned by, changing the league. Because as the game changes, as the time changes, I think the league has to change around it, and I'm all for a shortened season. Hopefully it feels a few more competitive games, a bit less incentive for load management. I like the idea of an in-season tournament, depending on what it looks like. But I think this is definitely a conversation that's worth having amongst the league and officials. And I know it'd be incredibly difficult to find some sort of compromise and balance, but I think it's possible and I think it should be done.
It's also interesting, and this will be the last point before we go to break, when you consider the way that the league is now consumed. And it's almost ironic because the pacing of an NBA league today is, even 5 years ago, it blows it out of the water in terms of the difference of speed in which offenses are operating. But it also kind of reflects how the NBA is being consumed. We are about jumping between different games. We are about the highlight and not necessarily the journey towards the highlight. And people are talking about TV ratings going down. And like I had a look just an hour ago even at the NBA Finals in the domestic market and how there was a huge drop for that last Finals with Toronto at Golden State against, LeBron in the days of LeBron James in a Cleveland uniform. And it's all about social media now. The reason why I don't think the commissioner, Adam Silver, is concerned is because he knows there is this amount of million people just on social media that are scrolling through their feed and watching 30 seconds of content and understanding what's going on. And that's why I think the pressure is there from one side, but in terms of consumption, the NBA is not in a place of weakness. They still have all the power.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see what Silver does about this, because he's got a bit more of a reputation than Stern as a more progressive commissioner who's open and willing to at least discuss and potentially implement change. So I think it's a conversation that's going to be had going forward. That they've got the board of the governors meeting in April where something like this would be voted on, and it wouldn't be until the 2020-2021 season, I believe. So I think over the next few months, this is going to be a bigger conversation going forward, and I'm all about it. I'm all for changing it.
So in summary, Patrick, you're bored. You are very much in favour of remedying said boredom through new changes to the league's schedule and a potential tournament. And I am slowly coming over to your side of the camp.
I'm all in. My chips are in, Lucas.
And with that, we'll take a quick break. This is a call out for watch enthusiasts everywhere. The Quick20 Network is growing and we now have our very own watch hobbyist website. So head over and visit thenextwatch.com. That's THENXT watch.com. With a ton of reviews, features and weekly columns on watches under four figures, thenextwatch.com has it all. Now, Patrick, before we get too deep into this discussion, I think it's fair to say that you never have really been a Russell Westbrook fan.
Understatement of the year there, Lucas.
And before we get into kind of this fall from stardom from what was, a league MVP and someone who was in everyone's top 10 lists, a few years ago, I kind of want to first talk about Daryl Morey, who is the Houston Rockets GM, and his decision to trade Chris Paul for Russ. Because Morey's a basketball genius, and where his genius lies in the way he approaches basketball analytics. He's been a stat head before it was cool to be a stat head. And you could almost say he's the godfather of half of the, formulas and the understandings of what they translate to and how they win basketball games. And if you're a little bit hesitant to trust in Morey after a few things that have happened recently and throughout his career, I think it's fair to say that he did put together a team that probably, if healthy, beats the Golden State Warriors in 2017-18. And that's my argument. The fact of the matter is Chris Paul was injured for 2 of those games, and yet they still went to 7 games. So take that what you will. But my question to you, Patrick, is, can you describe it? I mean, how does it make sense that a man that values stats and the efficiency and understanding true shooting and applying it to pace and, all these advanced things that my brain doesn't even understand, how does he land on Russell Westbrook, a player that goes against his ethos?
Yeah, I don't quite understand it either, because obviously we all know that Houston's built around James Harden, and it's built around putting Harden with guys who can shoot from 3 when they're open and guys who are going to cover for him defensively, essentially. And you've got Capella in the middle as your rebounder and setting picks, right? That's the formula, and you're right, it's worked, and it really could have worked on the biggest of stages with Chris Paul. So to go and get somebody like Westbrook, who is a beyond terrible three-point shooter and subpar defender to say the least, although he actually surprisingly had a good year or two defensively recently, he's not known as
last season he had a good defensive year.
Yeah, he's not a good defender though overall, and the numbers show that again this year, which we can get into. But I think the idea behind it is in a perfect world, Westbrook could be the off-ball athletic slasher that could give someone like Harden some reprieve, maybe a drive, dish, another drive, dish. Maybe Westbrook can take some more ball handling responsibilities and stagger some minutes with Harden. I think that's the theory on paper, but I don't buy it. I think Chris Paul was the much better fit next to James Harden. And for somebody like Morey with his philosophy, I think the only explanation was that they needed to trade Chris Paul because of some off-court issues, which reportedly had some tension with James Harden, which we never really got the full story on. But that's the only way I can really wrap my head around justifying a trade like this.
No, I came to the exact same conclusion. I think it was really you had to get rid of the asset while it still had value. Russell Westbrook was an All-NBA player last season, so to get a player that was not an All-NBA last season and was older than Russell Westbrook for Russell Westbrook, I mean, on paper it's a great trade, but the system isn't working. And it
doesn't fit. And if we want to go through some of Westbrook's numbers this year, for people who don't believe how truly awful he has been, and if we're looking at some of the advanced numbers, the following are the lowest he's had since his rookie year. His PER, his VORP, his win shares over 48, his offensive rating and his defensive rating are the lowest since his rookie year. His true shooting percentage and his box plus minus are the lowest of his entire career. And he's shooting 22% from three, which is only slightly better than his worst shooting year, which was back in 2009. And he's shooting the second most threes of his career. Go ahead, jump on.
Can I jump in on some of these stats as well? When you look at his field goal percentage by distance, the only area where he's excelling and shooting a respectable percentage is within 3 feet of the basket, which means two things. One, he's athletic enough to still, be trusted upon when he goes to the bucket. But two, it's really carrying that field goal percentage we're talking about, which on the year, Patrick, is, I don't know if you have it up, but from memory, it's around 40%.
It's 41% at the moment, which is, again, the lowest since his rookie year.
It is. And if you look at, he's shooting under 40% in every other part of the field, be it 3 to 10 feet, 10 to 16 feet, and obviously the 16 to 3-point and 3-point, where he's shooting 22%. And that in itself, in that offensive regime, where if you're not James Harden, you better be able to shoot the 3-pointer, is really quite detrimental. And it's affecting it's negatively affecting both parties. On an individual level, you have Russ, whose stats are taking this huge hit. And for the team as well, it's been quite detrimental in other games. And I think I hate to do it because I don't want to talk about the Spurs, but it really showed in Russell Westbrook's presence in the San Antonio Spurs game. He could not be relied upon to execute.
He had a historically bad night. I mean, we shout out to our Facebook page and Nick Walker for posting this fantastic stat, but he became the 6th player in NBA history to take more than 30 shots and score less than 20 points, which is not a club you want to be in. No. And I did find one little sneaky stat you might enjoy, Lucas. Through 22 games, I believe. 18 games. Westbrook has shot 96 three-pointers total. How many corner threes do you think he's made? In a system whereby PJ Tucker often leads the league in corner threes made in both corners, I might add, and where there's shots galore in the system and Harden running it and finding guys. How many corner threes do you think he's made?
4.
The easiest 3 in the game.
4.
0. He's not made 1.
Wow.
He's shooting 0% on corner threes, and I know that's a cherry-picked stat. It's one position on the court, but it's just
It's indicative
it shows that's someone like PJ Tucker who excels at playing defense and shooting corner threes in particular. That's the kind of role that somebody playing with James Harden needs and somebody playing in this Houston offense needs, and Westbrook's just not delivering. And that's the thing as well. Like, Houston are actually looking okay. They're currently fifth in the West, 13-7. But come playoff time, I think we all expect that it's going to be a problem.
But on both ends of the floor, and I think you raise a good point in that it's almost a mercy on Russ that Houston's playing well, because otherwise the media attention would be amplified dramatically. But in terms of the playoffs, yeah, the amount of switches that will be executed by opposing teams on Russell Westbrook will be huge. Like, it'll be utilized. It'll kill them, because he, again, isn't playing defense to any sound level. And on the other end of the floor, he doesn't need to be guarded. So if you can move your defensive man 3-4 feet closer to James Harden for the help, or if you can pack the paint to for Capella for the slashes, even the baseline pass to PJ Tucker, who, as you said, will be in the corner, that's a huge detriment to the team, because it's just increases the chances of getting a stop.
And you mentioned it as well. Teams, I was watching the Rockets the other day, and teams are already blatantly just leaving him open, and he'll keep taking them too.
He's
I think his pride gets in the way of him.
Exactly.
It's just it's absurd for somebody shooting that such a low percentage, 22%, and any opposing defense should lick their lips when they see him lining up for a 3-pointer.
This is one of those times when the eye test is actually as condemning as the advanced analytics, because I can't stress this enough. The advanced analytics do not place Russell Westbrook as an all-star reserve. They place him as a role player that shouldn't be playing more than 10 minutes. Like, if you look at his win share over 48 minutes is atrocious. Like, it's
terrible.
It's really not good. He's barely keeping a net. His box minus is in the negatives, which is really, really worrying. His offensive is the same, and for the first time outside of his rookie season, his offensive rating is under 105, really, and that's not an elite. That's not elite. That's not above average. That is really,
it's not a company you want to be in.
No, it's quite poor, and his defensive rating is not particularly good either. And the deeper you go into it, the more condemning it is. But my question now is, for Russell Westbrook, can you see a way in which he can redeem himself? Or is it really, if you look at the body of his career, is it one of those films that you had your 60 to 70 minutes of a great film and now the ending's just going to be terrible because the plot just got out of control?
Well, I think it's going to go back to the same question which has plagued his career so far. It's is he going to accept the role that he should be in? And the role that he should be in is not as the clear number 2 on this Rockets team. It's as a role player. It's accepting less shots. It's playing better defense, running an offense, and being a ball handler when Harden's not on the court. It's not taking over 5 threes a game. And honestly, trying to play hero ball all the time. And I know I'm a historical Westbrook hater, and there's going to be a lot of Westbrook fans out there that completely disagree and see a redemption arc, and they're going to at me on Facebook when he gets a triple-double next game. But the point is that the numbers, I don't think, are lying now. I think especially we've talked in the past about how his athleticism and the injury and the wear and tear over his legs over his career has been a problem. I don't think it's going to get any better for somebody who relies on his athleticism so much in his game. I think it's seriously time for him to reevaluate his role on the team and his standing in the league.
The problem is now, though, that he is in a position where it's almost impossible to trade him. His contract is one of the biggest in the league. In his last year, I think he's earning over $47 million. And really,
that's a few years away.
There's only 1 or 2 teams in the league that can take that on in that final year. And I think from memory, they're the Knicks and the Hornets or something. But as a trade asset, he really hurts them as well, because he's taking up all that cap. And I think what we've discussed inadvertently is he can't play on this Rockets team because his skill set just does not align with what they need. And this whole chaotic, unpredictable factor that Morey and other commentators have talked about in terms of what he could bring to the team, I just don't think the stars are going to align, because I think at the end of the game, you don't need chaos. I think you need order and a way to close a game out. And Westbrook, his playoff record proves this.
And especially when you look at somebody like Harden next to him, who doesn't have a fantastic playoff record himself.
No, but you can trust Harden to play within the system because he is the system. With Westbrook, I can't picture what he looks like in the last 2 minutes of a game unless he's on the bench, and that's just ridiculous. Your starting point guard shouldn't be on the bench, particularly when he's been proclaimed this accompanying scorer and the second number 2 guy on the team. In a close playoff game, Patrick, with one possession between two teams, where does he fit in the last minute? Like, what is he doing? He's not standing on the 3-point line with his arms open ready for the shot. Well, he is, but he shouldn't be.
Yeah, because his defender should walk straight over to James Harden for a double team.
I know, and that's what I don't like. He still has a credible skill set. He's a phenomenal passer. He's one of the best rebounders of all time
for his position.
I'd just say all time, really, because the dude's 6'4" and he's got seasons where he's averaged over 10 rebounds a game, which some centers don't do.
No, don't get me started on his rebounding numbers. That will be it for a while. But I agree. I think there is a role for him. There is something he can do. It's just not what he's doing right now.
The more I think about it, I think my conclusion is it's not about a role. It's just this is not the team he belongs on because it's just his skill set doesn't match up.
Move that contract unless they throw in assets
and they've
to get rid of their negative asset.
They're already depleted.
I mean, they traded one of the worst contracts in the league in Chris Paul for one of the other worst contracts in the league in Westbrooks. So,
but they also traded.
I don't know how they're going to bail
rounds.
out of this one. Yeah,
and that's the problem. It's this team. It is almost Daryl Morey's last attempt. It's his final ride into battle because he's completely drained the war chest, and outside of that, this team is not last year's team. It's certainly not the team before that. And I think for Westbrook now, I don't think he deserves to make the All-Star team. I know for a fact he's not going to be All-NBA this season. And
I think there's no way he deserves to be in the All-Star team, and he might get in on the voting scheme, which is
I don't think he will.
The All-Star game, and maybe Houston can get some more wins and rise up the conference whereby voters might think that they deserve 2 All-Stars, but personally, I don't see a spot for him in there, even with all these injuries.
Even the media, I think everyone is now aware that Russell Westbrook is not playing good basketball at this time. And I'm not discounting the capacity for him to play good basketball in the right system, but the way that it's all over social media, I had all of, a lot of my basketball friends were mentioning it, messaging me about, did you hear that he took this many shots or that he shot this poorly or, his plus minus was this bad. And it's just fascinating because I think you have terrible declines in players where it's literally 1 year they're at the top of the league and they're out, within a few years after that or the next year, really, for, factoring injuries. And then you also have the Vince Carter exits, which is still ongoing. It's this last encore, which every stage of his career has just melted and flowed smoothly. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But this is going to be brutal. I think
this is going to get ugly, I think.
And
I think it's going to be a really steep decline.
And it's just going to be compounded by the fact that the contract is that mammoth in scale.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how long he lasts if Houston are able to get off of him eventually, because I think they've taken a step back with him on board.
Yeah, and it's just crazy because, part of me thinks with the way the numbers are deteriorating, and everyone was aware that he was not playing the same level of basketball even last season to previous years. But where it goes from here and the way that the drop has just happened, like if I just do the numbers now, like really, if he was not a former league MVP, he'd be waived within 2 years, I would argue, because it's that bad of a situation right now.
Yeah, and I'm not betting on his legs and his game style to age particularly well.
No, and once that, elite explosiveness fails him, which it will, because he's over 30 now, eventually it will. All his skill sets pretty much get dragged down with him. So and I have not always been critical of Russell Westbrook because for a while there I was just in awe of what he did. And he's a Hall of Famer. He's very important to the culture of point guards and basketball. And I'd make that argument all day, but I do think that his career trajectory could be one of the steepest declines we've seen in terms of the heights where he was to where he may end up.
Well, can't wait for the next triple-double. That'll show us, won't it? A 15, 10, and 10 inefficiently in a loss. That's really going to put us in our place.
And on that note, we're going to go to our fun fact guy.
For today's fun fact, we turn our attention to 11-time All-Star and Hall of Famer Charles Barkley. Known today for his galactic personality and his divisive NBA commentary, Barkley's character translated directly to his basketball style. The 1993 NBA MVP made a total of 11 All-NBA teams, managed an NBA Finals appearance, and led the NBA in rebounds during the 1987 season. However, Barkley's appetite is said to be all the more legendary. In an interview with Jimmy Fallon, the Hall of Famer said he once tried to gain 20 pounds in 2 days to avoid getting drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers, who could only offer him a 1-year, $75,000 contract. Despite getting his weight to 302 pounds by binge eating for 48 hours at Denny's, the 76ers took him anyway. When he found that he'd still been drafted, Barkley told Fallon he remembered thinking, "Oh hell no, now I'm fat and poor." Back to you, boys.
Okay, Patrick, so we're going to do some quick fire takes. Are you ready?
I'm very ready.
Is Wiggins and his resurgence legitimate?
Quick fire takes, and I don't have a clear-cut yes or no answer, unfortunately, on the first one.
That's anticlimactic.
I'm a believer to an extent. So far, through this 20-game sample size, he's been a lot better, and we've both privately been very critical of the Wiggins fiasco in the preseason. He's saying he's definitely should be a top 100 player in the league, and I think we both agree that he's not. But so far, the improvements across the board are undeniable. I mean, we're looking at he's posting career highs in points, rebounds, and assists at 24, 5, and 3.5 respectively. He's shooting more threes, a career high 6.5 attempts at 34%, which isn't horrible. If we're looking at some advanced numbers, his career best offensive rating, defensive rating, PER, win shares per 48, VORP, and true shooting percentage all this year. And gobsmackingly surprisingly, the Minnesota are in the playoffs at the moment. They're 7th in the West. They're 10-10. He's been much better. I'm not going to say he's back. I'm not going to say he's redeemed himself and lived up from the hype, which came from his number one pick. But he's been a lot better this season.
Absolutely. And I think Ryan Saunders, the coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, really got through to him. Just breaking down the smart shots against, the not so smart shots. And again, I know people are probably going to be, haters of how often we go back to the stats, but in terms of his percentage of his field goal attempts by distance, everything that isn't within 3 feet and beyond the 3-point line, everything's gone down. He's not taking those inefficient mid-range shots as much as he used to. There has been a significant drop across the stats, and that's translating in the eye test as well. The way that he's dictating the game, the way that he's refusing to settle for a shot that is off balance and, a foot within the 3-point line, everything's adding up, and he looks like a more complete player. Now, is his defense fantastic? No. Is there work to be done there? Absolutely, but he's not a net negative.
Yeah, which is, considering over the last couple of years that he's put in, that is genuinely surprising.
And the fact that the Minnesota Timberwolves are looking like a competitive basketball team and are in the 8 as we speak, I mean, that's definitely something. I mean, he deserves some of that praise.
Yeah, and who knows if it'll last, but so far it's looking a lot better, especially considering, to be honest, I'd kind of given up on Wiggins as a positive player in the league. I kind of was designed that I'd kind of bought into the belief that his career was sort of destitute and that trend downwards would continue, but he's surprised me. He's looking pretty good this season. In the nature of quick fire questions, I'm going to throw one back at you. One of the more interesting topics so far this season, which I think might be one of the most under the radar, surprising standing moves, at least, is the Charlotte Hornets and how they're currently, Prior to the season, I would have said I did say that
You did.
they very, very, very possibly could challenge for the worst record of all time. And
I
so
agree.
far, I'm not looking good because they're currently at 9th in the East, which isn't impressive, which isn't amazing in a
I had them
vacuum.
at 10th.
But respected to their standings, it's not bad. And they're currently 9-14, which again, not good. But I would have thought
Much
9
worse.
to 15 wins would probably be their total for the season, and that's looking like that's going to be blown out of the water. What's your take on the Hornets? Could they be a playoff team?
I can understand the reasoning, but the short answer is no.
Yes. Okay.
I
good.
think
we
they-
haven't got too indulged in.
I
in
think
carrying
best case scenario, and a part of me really hopes that they actually sink in the standings. But best case scenario, they occupy the 10th seed, I think, come 82 game finish. And that's incredible because, again, I was with you. I had them at the 30th in the league in terms of record, bottom of the bottom. I had them 15th, and it wasn't even going to be close. I genuinely thought they could be the New York Knicks from a year ago. But at the end of the day, the way that they play underdog basketball, the beauty in which there is no real offensive anchor, which, has its downsides, but the fact that there's no one that demands the ball, there's no offensive stagnation of the traditional sort. This is a team that is playing team basketball and is bought into being selfless. They've won games that they shouldn't have won, and I think they will continue. So are they a playoff team? No. I think they finished 11th. That's my hope. But
Currently ahead of your Bulls, just quietly.
I'm really hoping the Bulls get one over them, but we won't
You'd
go.
be livid if they finish below the Hornets.
I think the Bulls' win streak really signifies a change, but just
How
ignore
long's that
for a
win
moment.
streak again? Yeah.
It's 2 games. It's 2 games.
Don't get used to it.
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think Detroit and the Bulls are better teams, and they push them to 11th.
Yeah, it's definitely surprising that they've come this far. They've got a couple of young, nice pieces that looks like they're actually coming out of the abyss, which had previously been the nothingness of Charlotte, but it looks like something's happening there.
It does indeed. Now, with our final question for you, Patrick, talk to me about Miami, and are they legitimate contenders? Could they possibly make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals after a 5-6 year absence? What's going on in Florida?
Well, this is a team that I liked coming out of the preseason. In some of our preseason pods, we were talking about, everyone had Milwaukee and Philly at the top of the East. I still do. But we were talking about what kind of teams could look at that 3rd seed. And I think ultimately I landed on Boston to take that pick, and that's looking pretty good so far. They're currently 2nd. But Miami was a team that I was really tempted by, and I thought I liked this team because we both like Jimmy Butler. He's had his chemistry and his problems in his last couple of years. But I think on this Miami Heat team, it's clearly built and revolves around him. They've got a clear identity. He's the alpha dog, and they've got a nice collection of pieces around him who on any night can go off. I mean, Kendrick Nunn has come out of nowhere as a rookie. Dragic is floating around with good games every now and then. Tyler Hero, who I liked before the season. Myers Leonard. Bam Adebayo, who's been fantastic so far this season. Justice Winslow, Kelly Olynyk. These are all just guys who are not superstars, they're not alphas, but they're guys that on any given night can give you a surprise 20-25 points and play the second fiddle to Butler, and they just have a nice identity now. So in terms of your question whether they could be an Eastern Conference finalist, I'm definitely not predicting that. All of them finishing in the 3rd seed, but I think they can make a bit of noise come playoffs, and we'll be talking about another team that we both like in a second. But I think this Miami team is frisky, and perhaps they're a move or two away from really challenging up the top of the Eastern Conference.
I back it. I think the stats that they're all putting up as a team are fantastic, and they're just playing team basketball, and it's a credit to Coach Spoelstra. I think the way that he is coaching them, the offensive sets that they're utilizing, this is a team that is playing good basketball, and they have that lovely balance between give the ball to Jimmy and pass the ball around until you get a good shot. And at the end of the day, that will serve them well throughout the regular season and into the post.
All right, Lucas, the last question in our quickfire round. It's a team that you notoriously love from last season. And another one that I'd sort of put in the surprise category for a lot of people, it's the Toronto Raptors. And I want to ask you, are you buying their rise so far this season, and do you think there's a scenario which they can make it out of the East. Are they still the team to beat in the Eastern Conference?
I am buying their rise because I think a lot of people discounted them, and I think a lot of people got too enamored with Kawhi Leonard. And I'm not taking anything away from Leonard because they had every right to believe in what he did. But this is a team that was solid, that has been solid for years, and has always had the infrastructure to play good basketball. And really, all it took was leaps from Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam to open and wake everyone up and remind them that these are players that closed out the Golden State Warriors. Siakam had huge games. Fred VanVleet hit 6 threes in like the fourth quarter of Game 6. They've played on the biggest stage. They have the confidence from playing on that stage, and they've ridden it into the season. And in terms of where's their ceiling, I think if depending on where the standings fall, it's more than likely that they could end up in the second round and even the Eastern Conference Finals. Do I think they're the best team? No. I think the Bucks at the moment are playing basketball that the Raptors can't even really compete with. But it would look, Siakam's 20 games in and he may have more left in the tank. My only real conclusion, I know it's weak, is you can't rule these guys out because they have the experience, and that more often than not does trump.
Yeah, they've been phenomenal. I like them a lot as well. I thought they'd be in the mix in the Eastern Conference. I think a lot of people really predicted a huge slip after with Kawhi's departure, but they have definitely exceeded my expectations. I didn't know they'd be this good. I thought Siakam would be better, but again, he's made another leap, and a lot of people would put him as one of the favourites of the most improved award back-to-back. But I think, but if we're looking at the next 4 games, it's going to be really to see how they can get through it, because they've got Houston next, then they've got Philadelphia, which will be a fantastic game, and then they've basically got to bye because they're playing the Bulls, and then we've got the Clippers. So I think 3 of those 4 games are going to be a really good litmus test for how good this Raptors team is. But yeah, I agree. I could definitely see them forcing themselves into that mix with Milwaukee and Philadelphia.
When I said they'd win the championship last year, I had more confidence, which is saying something, than this year. I don't think they win this championship, but my goodness, I wouldn't bet on it, just because there's something about their DNA now, the culture they've built, and Pascal Siakam that just scares me. I think everyone will take them seriously right until the buzzer goes that eliminates them somewhere deeper in the playoffs. But yes, anyway, Patrick, I think that's us for today.
God, lots covered, as usual.
That was high efficiency ratings right there.
And we had the volume of Westbrook, but the efficiency of the average NBA player. I had to get one more shot in there.
Much like Westbrook's philosophy. But anyway, you have an incredible...
We couldn't resist, could we?
No. You have an incredible night, my friend, and I will talk to you soon.
I will. You also. See you later.
Adios.